is the author of the Belgic Confession, and so that one fact makes him a significant figure, because the Belgic Confession is one of the three forms of unity, with the Heidelberg Catechism and the Canons of Dort, that are confessed by all the essentially European Reformed churches, certainly the Dutch Reformed churches in the Netherlands and in the English-speaking world and elsewhere. Well, the Belgic is held by millions of people, or has been over the centuries. Guy de Bres is a faithful, believing, evangelical Reformed pastor from the lowlands, again born in a Roman Catholic family, went off to university and became an evangelical, as they would have said then, Reformed Christian in the 1540s, and began preaching and teaching in the southern part of the Netherlands, so the French-speaking Netherlands, which was a dangerous thing to do. The Spanish were in the process of trying to wipe out the Reformation in the Netherlands, and so he was a marked man, and he spent a lot of time traveling back and forth between the Netherlands and France, between the Netherlands and England. He was in the what was then called the Strangers' Church in London for several years, where he met some significant figures. For a time, he studied with Theodore Beza, who would become Calvin's successor. So he had sort of a graduate course tutorial with Theodore Beza, and then followed Beza to Geneva. So he studied in Geneva. He was also in Frankfurt for a time with a bunch of Reformed refugees in the 50s. So providentially, he was really well prepared to produce the Belgic Confession in 1561. He also wrote two large works that are partially translated, one against Roman Catholicism and another against the Anabaptist theology, piety, and practice. And those are the two groups that he thinks about in the Belgic Confession, which was probably originally, according to one early editor of the Belgic, probably began as a series of sermons. And if you read the Belgic very carefully, at the end of some of the articles, you can hear de Bres preaching to his congregation. There's some very nice sort of gospel flourishes at the end of some of the articles. De Bres was, as I say, a faithful preacher. He was a itinerant preacher. He traveled underground. In the years while he was writing the Belgic in the lowlands, he was being actively hunted by the Spanish, and so he was literally hiding out while he was writing the Belgic. The congregations were meeting in secret. They were meeting on Sunday evening sometimes under the guise of holding dinner parties, which was ironic in the case that a minister would be present to administer communion. It was a dinner party of a different kind, in a sense. They were preaching out of doors with spotters up on a hill watching for the Spanish. So it was. They called themselves the Churches Under the Cross, and so they were, because in that period, 12,000 Reformed people were martyred for the sake of the gospel, and de Bres was one of those. May 31st, 1567. Having been arrested, escaped from jail, rearrested, he was finally put on the scaffold and hanged and martyred for the gospel. His last words to the people from the scaffold were that they should obey the magistrate whom God had placed over them. So he could have been potentially delivered by the French. People were prepared to ask the Huguenots to come and rescue them in Valenciennes, but he thought that was contrary to Romans 13, so he told them not to do. Better for him to die as a martyr than to contradict the scriptures. So, as I say, when I say de Bres was a faithful man and a minister, he paid for his fidelity with his life.